In this lesson, we're going to be setting up a Celery Heartbeat to run our task at a regular interval. So right now we've defined a Celery task, and we're able to use that Celery task manually off the Python or the Flask command line. But what we want to do is we want this to happen automatically. So we want our Celery task to run, every few minutes to check to see if there's any scheduled reminders. So that way we don't have to manually send them out, and the application will be self-running. Now to do this, we're going to use something called a heartbeat. A Celery Heartbeat is basically a Celery process that runs at a consistent interval, and within that process, it checks based off configured parameters if Celery needs to perform any tasks. So once we have our heartbeat configured, we can set a schedule so that the heartbeat knows to check, or rather to run our send reminders task at a regular interval. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is we need to create a Celery configuration file. Now this is going to exist within our app folder. So we'll go new file, and we'll go celery_config.py. Now this configuration file is going to, we're going to define a Python object within this Celery configuration, and then we're going to import it just like we did our Flask configuration in settings.py, and then we're going to configure Celery using this configuration, and you'll see here shortly how that works. So first let's do some importing. We'll go from Celery schedules import cron tab, and cron tab is just going to be a function that we use to schedule or actually define the schedule for our task. Now we need to set some settings. We'll go Celery schedule, or actually rather Celery imports first, and this is going to be a tuple, and it's just going to take the module that that we have our tasks defined in. So that is app.tasks, and that'll include all of those within our, or rather make them available to our Celery Heartbeat. And the next one is going to be Celery beat_schedule, and this is going to be a dictionary, and this will take this is where we'll define our actual schedule for our task. So first we need to name our scheduled item. We'll call it scheduled reminders. Actually, let's make sure. Actually, no, that should be fine. And then we'll open up another dictionary, and within this, we're going to define the task, and we'll set that to app.tasks.send reminders. So that's just our app module, the tasks module, and then the send reminders task that we defined within that module. And then we need to tell Celery when we want this task to run. So this is where we use our cron tab function. So we'll go schedule, and we'll make that equal to cron tab minute. Oops. And then we want to do it every minute. So then what this is doing is it's saying for this task, schedule it for every minute, which is essentially this asterisk right here. Now I find configuring cron tabs kind of confusing, but if you think about it like this, if you were to say, let's go minute 5, what this would do, it would run every hour at minute 5, it'll run this task. So that's kind of a different way of thinking about it. So it would be 105, 205, 305, that sort of thing. And then if you went 30, it would be 5:30, 6:30, 7:30. That's when this task would run. And you can change it to hours, but the concept is the same. And we know that we want it to run every minute because we want at least a minute granularity for our tasks, so that when we're sending reminders, we have the accuracy of scheduling them down to the minute. And I don't think I would go too much more granular than that. Now, if you do find this confusing and you come back at a later date and need to read it and don't understand it, you might want to just put a comment, run every minute. And that way when you go in and do a quick read, you can see, it runs every minute. and anybody else that's reading your code will understand that, and it's just a pretty good way of indicating what the cron is scheduled for. So now that we've defined our Celery configuration, we're going to have to add it to our Celery extension. So let's go to our init file, and what we're going to do is we're going to import the Celery config object, and we're going to pass it to our Celery extension. So let's go down under tasks, and we want to go from dot import Celery config, and that'll just import our Celery config as itself, or rather as a module, and then we're going to pass this to Celery. So let's go down. Let's go down to our register extensions, and after our inits, where we're setting some login manager configurations, we'll also set some Celery configuration. So we'll go Celery config from object, and this is, if you remember, exactly the same as configuring our Flask object, and then we want to pass it the Celery config. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. This is essentially a Python object because we're passing it along as a module, and we're just passing it right to the Celery as config from an object, and it'll know to look for the settings that we set within this module. So let's hit save on that, and then we're going to switch over to our shell, and we're going to start our Celery Worker and our Celery Heartbeat and see how that works out. So let's switch over to our shell, and what we're going to do is we're going to use a command that's very similar to the Celery command that we were using in the previous video, but we're going to include the Celery Heartbeat this time. So let's go Celery -b. Now dash B is going to indicate that we want the Celery Heartbeat to run alongside the Celery Worker. Now keep in mind this is only for development. In production, you should run the Celery Heartbeat as its own process. So let's set the log level. We'll set that to debug because we want to see some pretty verbose output just to make sure that everything's working. And then we're going to indicate the application that we're going to be running, which is going to be run.celery, and we're going to run a worker. Okay, so I'll hit enter, and you can immediately see this big wall of text. I'll try and get a little bit better context here, but you can see preparing boot steps, so it's booting up Celery. This is our worker, which is similar to what we saw before, and you can see it's the exact same. And right here you can see all the tasks that are associated or registered with it, which includes our app tasks reminder, our send reminders. And then down here you can see a little bit more information about it. But what we're looking for is beat. There we go. So info beat. It's a scheduler sending due tasks scheduled reminders app.tasks send _reminders. So that's the beat sending our scheduled reminder task. And you can see there's a little bit more. Obviously the debug information is pretty verbose, but you can see, it's applying the task of send _reminder, and it just ticked again, which means that it's been a minute since we started it, and you can see right here waking up in 59.93 seconds. So the beat goes to sleep, and then it comes back up again a minute later to send the task that we've scheduled to go for every minute. So it looks like it's working. So what we should do now is probably test it. So we'll create a scheduled reminder 1 minute in the future, and then we'll see that make sure that it works. So let's switch over to Chrome, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a reminder maybe 1 minute in the future. So let's put in a message. Don't forget to start your Celery Worker, and we'll set it to today, and it's 9:30 right now. So let's go 9 o'clock, and then we'll just go. It's 9:33, so let's go 9:34. We'll create that, and you can see it's pending. Now I just saw the Celery Heartbeat tick, so we have about a minute to wait. What I'll do is I'll just pause the video, and then in a minute I'll start it back up, and we'll see if the pending status is still there. So it looks like the Celery task ran, so let's just refresh here. Now you can see it's still pending. Now this is because when we inputted our data from the user interface, we set it for 9:34 a.m. But I know that there's a difference between the time that we submitted it through our browser and the server time that Python's running in the backend. So what we need to do, let's check what that is currently set to, and then we'll figure out a way to normalize this, normalize these date times so that they are consistent. So let's switch over to our shell. What I'm going to do is I'm going to update my server time to my local time. Now, if this was a production level application and we had multiple users and we had to account for their time zones, this would be a really bad approach. But just to keep things moving along so that we're not spending too much time working with time zones, I'm just going to set it at my server level so that when I go to set my reminders, it's the same as my server, and then it's good to go. So we're going to use a command in Ubuntu to update our server time. So we'll go sudo dpkg-reconfigure tz data. So this is just going to help us change the time zone data. So for me, it's an American time zone. I mean, I'm Canadian, but technically it's an American time zone, or at least that's how they've organized it. And mine's kind of weird, but it's Saint_John. Where is it? There it is, St. John's. Okay, so I'll click that, and it looks like local time is now NDT, which is what I want, and that's 10:56. And yeah, that matches my time now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. It's been a little while since I submitted the existing test. So what I'll do is I'll submit a new one, and we'll just confirm that it's working now. So let's switch over to Chrome. I'm just going to do a refresh, and you can actually see that the old one that we had created has set, or rather has sent. But that's okay. Let's get rid of that just so we start from square one. Okay, let's try again. So let's go with the message. This is a test. Now we want it to send. It's 10:57 right now. So let's go the 17th, and let's go 10, and then I'll change it to 57. And then we'll go create. Okay, so that looks good. It's pending, and there's no sent on. So now we just wait for the Celery beat to tick, and I'll stop the video, and then when that happens, I'll start again and show you. Okay, so it looks like it ticked again. So let's go to our application, and I'll restart the page. Okay, so there we go. It looks like it delivered this time. It looks like our task ran. It found that this message was ready to go out, and it set up, or rather it set the date to now. So I want to reiterate that what I did was updating the time zone on my server to match my local time zone. This wouldn't work if multiple people were using the application across multiple time zones. So what you would need to do is you would need to go with an ISO standard date, and you would need to pass that with its time zone information to the backend, and then your backend would need to realize that that's time zone specific time, and then it would need to coerce that data to a standardized time, which is usually something like UTC, and then store it in the database as that UTC time, and then you can go ahead and display it in any format that you want. And you can see how that would kind of be a little more work than we need to take on right now. But I just wanted to touch on that because that's the appropriate way to do this. And if that's something you're interested in, you can definitely take the time to do it. There would need to be some changes to the datetime plugin, as well as the form, the WT form that we used on the back end. And you would just need to update them to be able to kind of just work with the date and standardize it across the two. So let's commit our progress for the lesson, and then we'll wrap up. So let's go to our shell. We'll get a decent tab here. There we go. Let's clear this out. We'll go git status, and you can see the changes to the init file and the Celery config file was created. So we'll go git add git status. Looks like those are good, staged and ready to go. So we'll create a git commit, and we'll just say set up Celery Heartbeat. And so we set up Celery Heartbeat and schedule task. Okay, that looks good. So that's the end of this lesson. We configured Celery to use the Celery Heartbeat to send our task, or rather run our task at a regular interval, and it looks like it's working. In the next lesson, we're going to set up our task to actually send our SMS message for our reminder.